Χαίρετε. Good evening, everybody. Αν είστε εντάξει να μιλήσω στα αγγλικά για το χαιρετισμό κτλ. This is an event taking place in regards to the memory of Dr. Martin Hellicar, titled Halting the extinction of the emblematic Griffon Vulture in Cyprus. Our event will have the speech of Mrs. Merpo Apostolidou with a short introduction of Dr. Erato Kozakou-Markoulis. Dr. Erato Kozakou-Markoulis is the co-chair of SDSN Cyprus, Sustainable Development Solutions Network. She served as Minister of Foreign Affairs and as Minister of Transport, Communications and Works of Cyprus. During her diplomatic career, she served as ambassador to various countries, including the United States, Sweden, Finland, and Brazil. During her career as a diplomat, she represented Cyprus in numerous assemblies, congresses, and conferences of the European Union, the United Nations, the Non-Aligned Movement, the Commonwealth, Council of Europe, and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Dr. Kozakou-Markoulis has published a large number of articles on a wide range of issues, including the Cyprus problem, the United Nations, European Union, foreign policy, cultural diplomacy, and gender equality. I invite Mrs. Dr. Markoulis for her speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Constantine. Welcome. Martin Abbas Hellicar was best known as the director of BirdLife Cyprus, one of the most active and the most successful nature conservation organizations on the island, and was considered a friend by so many of us at SDSN Cyprus. We valued him not only for his relentless efforts to protect Cyprus's wildlife, and in particular the birds, and its ever-shrinking habitats, but also for his incredible optimism and his sense of humor. Here at SDSN Cyprus, he was a valued founding member of our network, one of our staunchest allies for the fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals in Cyprus. For the last 3 decades, Martin was always at the forefront of all the key struggles to protect the natural environment, first as a journalist at Cyprus Mail, and then as director of BirdLife Cyprus. From the conservation of the Griffon Vulture to the struggle against the cruelty of illegal bird trapping, he was always on the front lines. His mission to understand and to protect the natural environment was a lifelong one, reflected also in his university studies. Martin earned his PhD from the University of Cyprus with a thesis on grazing with biodiversity, preceded by ecological studies at York and Lancaster universities in the UK. Even then, his interest was in birds and their threatened habitats. His work as an academic was indeed well respected. For example, his study in 2004, which identified the benefits of small-scale farming for biodiversity. Cyprus's nature has lost, indeed, one of its outstanding defenders, and like everyone else who was lucky enough to work with Martin, we shall miss him dearly. Let us now watch a short memorial tribute video for Martin Hellicar.
have a little bit of a confession to make. When we started deciding we wanted to focus on this 15 years ago, my idea was, perhaps being from a slightly more sort of academic background, that we have to explain it all to people. You know, much as I bored you in the introduction with an explanation about natural balance and the importance of species. You don't. You don't. The good news is that all you need to do, especially with children, and they'll bring their parents along with them, is show them a flamingo in a telescope.
Martin Hellicar, age 56, tragically passed away on the 15th of June 2024, following a car accident. Martin's life was dedicated to the conservation of Cyprus's rich biodiversity, and his influence has left an indelible mark on the island's environmental landscape. His advocacy for a balanced approach to conservation was rooted in the understanding that all species, whether common or rare, play critical roles in ecosystems' health. Martin often highlighted the ugly reality of the retreat of nature and the undermining of ecosystems as a case of death by 1,000 cats, many of these cats going unnoticed and unchallenged. His humor, kindness, and optimism were infectious, whether navigating the complexities of conservation policy or sharing the simple joy of birdwatching with dear friends and children. Martin's passion shone through.
Αρέσκει μου η διάσωση του είπα, η προσπάθεια της διάσωσης της Λίβας σαν στόχος, επειδή ο Λίβας είναι σίγουρα εμβληματικό είδος, αλλά κακά τα ψέματα δεν είναι το πιο χαρισματικό είδος της ψινοπανίας μας. Οπότε, αν καταφέρουμε που θα το καταφέρουμε, θα έχουμε καταφέρει να μιλήσουμε με τη γλώσσα της οικολογίας παραπάνω και των οικοσυστημικών υπηρεσιών και να συνδέσουμε τη σημασία ενός άχαρου συσσαγωγικά είδους με την ισορροπία του οικοσυστήματος που κάτι πρέπει να πετύχουμε για το καλό μας, για το καλό της ανθρώπινης κοινωνίας σε βάθος χρόνου.
Martin's legacy lives on in the thriving bird populations and preserved habitats across Cyprus. We, the team BirdLife Cyprus, feel privileged to have worked alongside Martin and are committed to continuing his mission. Rest in peace, Martin. Your work, your spirit, and your love for nature will continue to guide us.
For decades, Griffon vultures have been suffering mass losses from poisoning incidents, which have driven the resident population of the island to functional extinction if no action is taken. However, focused conservation actions to reduce mortalities and boost the local population give hope for the future of these emblematic species. For this topic, Mrs. Melpo Apostolidou will give a lecture in a little bit. She is the director of BirdLife Cyprus, one of the most active environmental NGOs on the island, since September 2024. She has over 14 years of experience in bird conservation, while her previous roles in the organization were on project management and planning, awareness raising, and communication. Mrs. Apostolidou graduated from Aristotelian University of Thessaloniki with a degree in biology and from the University of Southampton, UK, with an MSc in environmental monitoring and assessment. She's a highly motivated professional conservationist with a passion to protect wild birds and habitats. Melpo has experience in wetland restoration, and the past 5 years, she has been working on restoring the threatened vulture population in Cyprus. Invite Mrs. Apostolidou for her speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for the kind words about Martin. The effort to halt the extinction of this emblematic species needs to carry on without Martin, but our organization is devoted and dedicated in this cause. I'll talk in English, right, Konstantinos? Yes. So, why are we working for vultures? Vultures has been an abundant species. In the first half of the 20th century, there are reports where 140 individuals have been observed at a single carcass in the 1950s. In the latter half of the 20th century, with frequent poisoning incidents and decreased food availability, caused a rapid and sustained decline in the population. And in 2005, we had just 14 individuals. To give you the perspective of this number, the favorable reference value for the population of the species in Cyprus is 200 individuals. So apparently there was a need to restore and help the species thrive again. This photo is from the 80s, and it's possibly the only proof of how abundant Griffon vultures have been. 2023 has been the first year where we didn't have any breeding of the species on the island. And this is a big failure for Cyprus. Why? Why has the population been declining, and what do we know about the mortality of this population? We have gathered data from 1996 until 2024, and we've counted 76 Griffon vulture deaths. The 56 out of these 76 deaths are due to poisoning. And I'm sure this is an underestimation of the birds we have lost, because not all deaths come to our, we don't know about all deaths. However, other threats to the species are collisions and electrocutions with the electricity grid network. 4 deaths have been due to unknown causes. Very few are attributed to shooting, to lead poisoning, and a few attributed to the disorientation and exhaustion. In the last 10 years, we had 2 mass poisoning events, and with every event, the population was decreased by 50%. The most recent one was in 2022, where we were estimating that we had 18 to 20 birds. And with this mass poisoning event, we lost half of the population again. However, the key information here is that we lost the breeding pairs. We lost the birds that would continue giving offspring to the population, and we lost 2 chicks. So the small birds you see on the photo are 2 chicks from 2 different nests. Luckily, when this event happened, we had 15 birds in the aviary that had been transferred from Spain, and they were ready to be released. So we were kind of lucky enough that these birds that we had just brought were not outside the aviary to get poison, but at the same time, we managed to release birds before we lose the whole population of the island, and this means that it's very difficult and much more expensive to re-establish, rewild, reintroduce a species after it has been lost. According to a study the Vulture Conservation made, this study tells us that if these mortality rates and these poisoning levels continue at this rate, at this frequency, the population is predicted to go extinct in the next 15 years. Currently, we have 38 birds. 35 of them are the ones that have been donated from the Spanish government to the Cyprus government. So there was a need for a very targeted, intensive effort to halt the extinction of the species. And why do we want to save Griffon Vulture is a whole, and why biodiversity is important is a totally different presentation and talk. But I'm happy to discuss this at the end if you would like to. So we applied for funding from the European Union, from the LIFE program, and the project has a budget of 1.4 million euros with 4 partners that are implementing, which means that they're also contributing with their own funds to this effort. And this is BirdLife Cyprus as a leading partner in collaboration with the Game and Fauna Service, which is the competent authority for birds in Cyprus, the Vulture Conservation Foundation. They are the experts on a European level on vultures, and collaborating non-governmental organization, Terra Cypria, which is based in Limassol. And the main aim, and I think I will not show you many photos of dead vultures in the next slides, but the main aim of our project is to reduce the Griffon vulture mortality, first of all, and this is our focus, and I want to emphasize that, and at the same time boost the population through restocking and also improvement of the feeding opportunities. So the main driver of extinction is the use of poison. And to give you just an example, on Sunday, when the hunting, it was the first day of hunting, we had 6 incidents of use of poison baits across Cyprus. And this was just in one day. I will talk about a bit later about this. But this is a problem of our country, which is not only in our country, of course. Other countries have similar issues. The thing is that we cannot afford to lose more birds. So this issue needs a holistic approach if we want to reduce the levels of use of poison in the countryside. So we have worked on 4 main pillars. One was to improve the knowledge around the use of poison, and as well as the ecology around Griffon vultures and how the use of poison impacts the population. We worked to enhance the investigation processes. Why? Because use of poison is an illegal activity. It is punishable by law. And investigation and law enforcement is one of the key solutions to this problem. If no one will, ever gets convicted, this thing is not going to stop. At the same time, we're working on awareness level around use of poison, again on many levels, from small kids to old shepherds and hunters. And at the same time, we have implemented concrete conservation actions to help the Griffon vulture population. So I'm not going to go into details about all the studies we did, because I don't want to bore you, but everything is available on the project website, and I'm also available if you would like to discuss something. But I'm going to focus on the rest of the 3 pillars. So in May 2022, we created a great tool that removes poison from the countryside. And this is Dixie and Sophie, 2 border collies, sniffing dogs, something similar to what police is using for drugs. And it's not something, we did not invent the tahini pie in Cyprus. This is something that is being used across Europe and outside Europe, of course. But this is a great tool, and I'll explain why. Andreas and Sophie and Andreas and Dixie are patrolling our countryside, and they're responding to people who call for suspected poisoning or use of poison in the countryside, not in urban areas, okay? So now the civilians have a number to call, someone to come and collect them. But at the same time, these anti-poison dog units collect information, where, how many, evidences from the scene. And this help in the overall effort. At the same time, they're a great communication tool because they're very visible in the countryside. Most of the hunters, we've been to hunting exhibition, we talk to hunters, they know about these anti-poison dog units, and I don't think it's so much the social media exposure we have given, but it's also the word of mouth with regards to these great anti-poison dog units. And they also act as a deterrent factor, of course, because people know that an area is being patrolled. So very briefly, and this is an actual photo of, poison baits are collected in bags and in kilos, but very briefly, from the day of their operation in May 22 until December 23, they completed 680 patrols, responded to 176 incidents. These are calls of civilians, and they collected 70 kilos, over 700 pieces of poison baits, and 81 dead animals. Now, why poison baits are used? Based on studies we have done, but also from the knowledge we collect from the field, it's mainly by hunters who want to deter other hunters from hunting in their areas. And if you think that a small piece of kebab laced with lanate, with toxic substances, is not dangerous for vultures, the truth is that it is. We had the last breeding pair of Griffon vultures was lost because they ate a poison dog that ate a small piece of meat. Because they're so excellent in finding dead animals, they will find it and they will eat it. And because Griffon vultures are very social, not with humans, but between them, they eat all together. So they die together. Συγγνώμη. This is for 1 year and a half, 20 months. Yes, and we have data from, we are collecting data from 24, but they haven't been analyzed yet. So the other motive is use of poison baits by usually farmers to exterminate foxes or stray dogs, but also often they don't want hunters in their area. And also it's been placed by hunters also to exterminate foxes. So there are many motives behind this, and trust me, awareness raising is not enough. Some people will not change their bad habits. So these are various types of poison baits, and this is how a poison bait looks. Of course, this was set up in a studio, but it represents how they look. It can be pieces of meat, it can be eggs, it can be pieces of meat on a bag hanging from bushes, and usually what gives it away is you will see dead insects on the meat or in the area. The substances that are used, because we do collect this and we give them to the State General Laboratory and they do analysis, is mainly carbofuran, or known as furadan, or methomyl, known as lanate. These are illegal substances that are banned across EU. So apparently there's also a black market around this, because we do find them. So with regards to investigation, what we've tried to do and what we have achieved, basically, I mean, if you told me in 2019 that a police would come on the scene where we found a dead bird, I wouldn't believe it. We did trainings for the competent authorities, because investigation is a whole chain of competent authorities, from the crime scene, where the Game and Fauna Service should be there, the police should be there, to the veterinary services lab, where they will do a necropsy if there is a dead animal, to the State General Laboratory that will do all the toxicological analysis, to the legal services, where you have the prosecutors, and it's a whole chain if you want to succeed to punish this illegal act. So we did a lot of trainings to these, to officers of these competent authorities. We increased collaboration. I mean, 10 years ago, the State General Laboratory would not accept to do analysis. So there was no way we knew what's going on. And they've been really amazing. It was just a matter of getting there in the end. They have been amazing, and now they've been doing all the analysis. And what we also achieved was to create an investigation protocol, so an official document of this process of investigation, signed by the Cyprus police and all these agencies that I mentioned. So there is a protocol. It doesn't matter if every time there is a dead bird, we call the police station and they don't know what we're talking about, but we are getting there. At least you can refer to a protocol and call somebody higher, and eventually they will come. I've talked about this already. And something positive. In December 2022, it was the first time where a case was solved. A guy was putting poison baits regularly, and eventually, to our luck, a Bonelli seagull ate the poison. But the specific Bonelli seagull had a GPS tag on its back. So we knew where it died, where it was thrown away, so we could go back to where it died and found the poison and the guy who did it. And a 21,000 euro fine was given to this guy. Of course, he did not pay, and he's counting on the fact that he will eventually go to court and the judge will give him a soft pat on the back. Don't worry, I'll give you a 500 euro fine and you will get away with it. But we're working with the legal services so this does not happen, because this is a solid case. Now, collisions and electrocutions, this is how I spent my Easter day this year. From the 44 Griffon Vultures that we released, we lost 10 birds. 6 of them, which is actually good, it's a success. You do expect some losses when you release inexperienced birds. So 10 deaths out of the 44, 6 of them died because of electrocution and collision on electricity grid. Why this happens? Because Griffon vultures like to sit on high perches, and because they're big birds, they touch and they get fried, unfortunately. But other species get affected as well. So what we're doing is working with the Electricity Authority of Cyprus, and in the next few days you'll probably hear about how this collaboration is going, because when it comes to electrocution, it's not going very well, and we're about to expose them in the media. So yes, what we're trying to do is put anti-collision markers, because there are solutions which are placed on the overhead power line, and birds can see it because they move, and we reduce the risk of collision. And when it comes to electrocution, we need to insulate existing pylons. What we don't want to do is keep putting network in high-risk electrocution and collision areas without any measures. So the new lines should either go underground where possible, or be insulated, but being insulated and not with a tela, with tape, okay? Because this is what the Electricity Authority is doing at the moment. So at the same time, as I mentioned, we're following this holistic approach to reduce the levels of use of poison, but at the same time want to support the population and be a step ahead before we lose a lot of individuals, and then the recovery is much more difficult. So it doesn't look like we're helping the bird, but we are. We're trying to catch it to put a tag on it. So the Spanish government trusted the Cypriot government and donated 44 birds. Of course, we do pay for these birds because there are costs to bring them, and for veterinary care, and the GPS tax, and so on, but these are donated. And it's very important to do these restocking efforts before we lose the population, because you don't want to lose all the local knowledge that the local population has, the roosting places, the nesting places, the feeding places. You don't want that information to get lost. So you're not reintroducing Spanish birds in an environment where there are no vultures. So these have been the 3 different releases, and at the same time want to improve the way vultures are feeding. We don't want to be dependent on the feeding stations that already exist. We have 4 feeding stations that are operated by the government, 3 by the Game and Fauna Service, and 1 by the Department of Forests. So you don't want the birds to know the menu or the time, the opening hours of the restaurant. So they know Tuesday, Friday, I go to Limnatis, Monday, Thursday, I go to Ayannis. You want to improve their their natural way of behavior, the way they wander, because there are wanderers. There are the wanderers, because this is what they do. So what we want to do is, yes, we are creating another central feeding station, but ultimately we want to create small feeding stations near farms, near livestock farms, in order to stimulate this natural way of feeding. And this is what we're trying to achieve. At the same time, of course, we're monitoring the birds, so we know what's happening and why are they dying. and we know which sites they're using. So this helps us to focus our conservation efforts. Where do we need to put more effort in education, awareness raising, patrols of the anti-poison dog units? Where do we need to be more present? So most of the birds are fitted with GPS tags. This is an unupdated slide, by the way. We have 38, and 37 of them have GPS tags on them. So we know what's going on. So yes, we can track their movements, and we do analysis of which are their favorite, let's say, spots. And where, if they nest, we know if they will be sitting on a cliff for hours and hours. We know that probably means nesting. If they find a carcass and they go and we see feeding behavior, we go and visit and see what did they eat and where and why. I mean, because also it's illegal to leave carcasses outside in the countryside. But yeah, in general, the GPS tags revealed a whole new world for us, the vulture freaks. Awareness raising and education. I mentioned at the beginning that we did a number of studies to better understand the motives, and I have mentioned a few of those motives behind the use of poison. And all this information is used for our targeted conservation and communication work. This is a champion shepherd, by the way, in the area of Paramali. And we are creating the first farm feeding station near his farm next year. A lot of awareness raising and education, information signs, posters, billboards. I don't know, Yorgo, if you recognize the receivers of the information. There are your brother's kids. And of course, a poster with the numbers of the anti-poison dog units, and these have been placed in communities, coffee shops, but not like Nicosia Center coffee shops, like Cafenedes. Yeah, so a lot of information is available, and also, as they say, teach them young. We go to schools and we try to inspire kids and to appreciate nature, Cyprus nature, vultures. And as Martin says, they're not the most charismatic and beautiful birds, but they're very important. We do a lot of press work, a lot of media exposure that help in these efforts. These are some newspaper clippings from the news, and this is nothing compared to what we have. We're giving interviews. So this is more or less what we do, and you will see also in the documentary a bit of this effort, which doesn't cover all the aspects, but this presentation covers most of it. So you might wonder, okay, the funding will finish, so what's next? What's going to happen? Well, the truth is that if we stop the conservation effort for the Griffon vulture, we will go back to where we were 10 years ago. And to be honest, Cyprus was very late in starting the conservation work. I mean, other countries started where their population reached 100 species. And I'm talking about countries like Sardinia, which is not a massive, doesn't cover a massive area, it's similar more or less to Cyprus. They started when they had 100 birds. They didn't start when they had 8, because this is when we actually started the focused and very intensive conservation efforts. So we need to continue to monitor the protocol, and are the cases being investigated. We need to continue to collect data from the anti-poison dog units. We need to continue and keep the momentum of engagement with all the competent authorities, because it's true that we are all very busy, and for example, the State General Lab that is doing all the analysis for humans and murders and all the deaths and the hospitals and all the narco tests. So this comes on top of their work, and it's like that for all the relevant authorities. So we need to keep the engagement and building the capacities. And we're also creating a national anti-poison roadmap. So this is like a prescription book, what we need to do to continue the anti-poison efforts in a right framework, so we don't waste our time. So this is more or less from me. Thank you very much. I hope it was not too much. I don't know if you want me to show the documentary or accept questions, couple of questions if there are any now. And then you prefer like that? Yeah, sure. Please.
Let me congratulate you first for your tremendous work. Martin's, the whole group. It's unbelievable what you're doing. I would like to ask something that I ask usually when I witness such kind of behaviors. What is happening in other countries? Is it a phenomenon, let's say, of the Southern European countries, or is it all over the world? For example, in Spain or in Italy, we have the same sort of mentalities, or in Greece. What is the behavior there of all those culprits? The hunters, are there any statistics where we stand? I mean, are we at the bottom of the list of?
We usually are, aren't we?
Yes, we usually are, but is that the case also with the vulture population?
Yes, so if I understood correctly, you're talking more around the use of poison and the approach of...
and the police and
the whole thing, okay. So, yes, we are facing similar problems to what other countries are facing. In the UK, they use poison, in Italy as well, but even, northern Italy and Hungary and across Europe, use of poison is not an exclusive problem to Cyprus. However, in our case, it's the frequency is one of the higher. And this is also evident by the fact that we have lost, I didn't mention it, we've almost lost ravens. Ravens are a bird species, crows. They're big crows. And I think we have around, in the Republic of Cyprus, because in the occupied north we have more, we have around 5 birds. This is indicative of how extensive the use of poison is in Cyprus. They also have a problem in Spain, for example, and I'm using Spain as an example because they are the champion of the Griffon Vulture population. They have a fantastic, healthy, numerous population. The reason they have this healthy population is because they have been working on anti-poison and on wildlife crime for decades. They had failures as well, but they've managed after years of decades to reduce the levels so their population, the vulture populations recovered. And this is why they can afford to give birds to other European countries. In Bulgaria, in Italy, they're giving all across Europe. So yes, we are facing similar challenges as other countries are as well. And there are also efforts that are, and actually this is a very good time because there is a coordinated effort across Europe on anti-poison. There are projects on the Balkans. They have like 12 countries, and there is also, it's being done on other levels as well, with prosecutors. A lot of work is being done to raise awareness on wildlife crime. I mean, it's a hot potato at the moment. But yes, in a nutshell, it's a similar situation, but we are in the bottom when it comes to the Griffon vulture population. It's the smallest in Europe. I mean, 38 birds is one, if they eat from one carcass, we will lose 25 birds. So we go back. I mean, it's a very challenging effort with high risk of failure. It's like wildfires. How many people do you need to destroy a forest? You need one person to do a big damage. Yes.
You made a short notice. Of course, vultures, like other birds, do not recognize dividing lines, and I'm sure I would be interested to know what is happening in the occupied areas regarding these things, and if you have any contacts with them, are you coordinating any efforts to have better results? Thank you.
Thank you. It's actually a very good question. Birds do not know boundaries, indeed, and they do travel to the north as well. They don't use the north much. They will not land often. There is a use of poison in the north as well. We don't have a full picture of how the levels of it in the north. We do collaborate with another non-governmental organization that works on birds. It's called Kushkor. And we also work with it's a private rehabilitation hospital called Tashkent. And there were incidents where we had to call them to go check on a Griffon vulture that stayed for 2 days in Carpathia, for example. On the other hand, it's easy that this effort falls a victim to the political situation because it's not easy to work, because you also need the involvement of competent authorities. And it's with this political scene in Cyprus, it's very difficult. We don't recognize them, so we cannot work as here with the government, with their so-called government anyway. But what we try to do is through bi-communal projects to gather more information and get the NGOs to work with the competent authorities there. We haven't started yet, but there are some small steps in trainings and things like that. But we do still have a long way to go.
Thank you very much, Melpo. Impressive work, and I think Martin would be very proud of the work you do. And you continue this fantastic work. Question, in the beginning you show a very nice picture from the 80s with many vultures.
From Bendaya.
Yeah. Do we know why the behavior of people change? And why, I mean, I don't know if you have records from that period, but I wonder, I mean, as the societies grow and we should be more educated. So what really changed and we have all this poisoning? What's the driver I'm trying to understand why from this we end up to the situation today. I would actually expect to see more poisoning back then than now. So I'm really...
We don't really have information on how much poison was used in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, not so much. We don't really know if the use of poison
Are there any
has...
other drivers of this loss? Because the focus, you put a lot of effort on poisoning. Is there any other causes of this
decrease.
of decline?
The main driver is the use of poison. But it's, we estimate that, let's say before the 50s or around 40s, we had maybe 1,000 vultures. And this is an estimation based on the landscape compared to Crete and what Crete has, because it's a very comparable situation. So we estimate that in this century we had around maybe 700, 800, 1,000 birds. So gradually we've reached in this last maybe 50, 60 years to 10, this shows that use of poison has, you know.
But it's not due to land use change, urban sprawl, or other causes.
Of course, you have habitat loss, but the reason we have lost colonies is because there are no birds, because they have died. So imagine, I mean, in the 90s, there are some records of 30 griffons being poisoned. I mean, we continuously had mass poisonings throughout the years. It's very hard to tell if it was more or less. I believe it's less now. I believe it's less. But we have very few birds. So the impact is huge. And it's still a lot. It's still a lot of, the levels are very high. So the fact that we have the anti-poison dog units and now we collect, we will be in a position to compare years from 2022 onwards. So we can draw conclusions how these will go in the next years. So usually the graphs we see from other countries is use of poison going down, numbers of vultures going up. So these are the examples we see from other countries. So we need to start from somewhere here to go up. So the easy answer is we don't really know if it has been increased or is being used less. And also we need to think that, for example, strychnine, toxic substance, was used by the government in, I think in the 70s or the 60s, legally, to exterminate foxes. This is not happening now. There is a black market. The access to these substances is more hard. You have to know your way around. I think it's less, but it's still a lot. Sure.
As you are studying very much the behavior of vultures. Yes. I come from Kythrea, Pedalactyl was there. We had such experiences. But in the area also of Karthu, there were a lot of vultures. And I was listening to stories from people from there that they had a very strange behavior. For example, at some point of time, they were looking for an old man who died, and nobody knew. And then they saw vultures in the area, and what they have noticed is if the body was lying in a certain position, they never touched it. I don't remember now it was east, west, or the other way around. In other cases, it was on the other side, they were doing that. And I was so much impressed to hear these kind of stories. They had this special behavior regarding dead people.
I don't want to ruin your idea of this story, but Okay, I've heard a lot of stories around vultures, and it's amazing how in every coffee shop in different villages I go, I hear the same stories. That when they were kids, they went and grabbed the vulture while it was feeding, and the vulture flew, and the kid flew together with the vulture. And I've heard this many times in so many different villages. But there are different stories that I often hear. I've heard this before, but maybe it has to do with the location. So if if they could not land easily or take off, or the winds were not favorable, this is the reason why they did not land to feed on a carcass, or maybe another reason. We don't really know. We have two of the feeding stations we have. They're rarely used by griffons. We don't know why. We don't know why they don't land there. It's a very nice spot. No, they choose to go to the farm next to it. They don't go there. And we don't really know why. But when we're trying to identify a good spot for a feeding station, the things that we take into account is it easy for them to land? Is it easy for them to take off? So maybe humans combined the body posture with, with the behavior of the vultures, but I don't think it's based on scientific data.
You keep on referring, Melpo, to the feeding stations. If we don't have feeding stations and we have all these changes in regulations, especially on how to treat dead animals these days, I mean, the reason why I ask about the 80s compared to now, I suppose one would expect more dead animals in the countryside. Now we have procedures for health issues, all regulations and so on. So now, if we are to increase their numbers, how would they naturally feed if we don't have any feeding stations? What's the source to keep the population increasing?
Griffon vultures are very easy birds. They don't want a lot. They're not like women where, what is the perfect, life for you. They want food and they want cliffs. And that's all they need. And they don't need poison. So if we stop the feeding stations, they will not find food because according to sanitary regulations, livestock breeders are not allowed to leave carcasses in the countryside. However, there are EU regulations that allow, because when this legislation on a European level was created, all the scavenger populations, and I'm talking about wolves, bears, vultures, their populations dropped dramatically. So they created other regulations to allow for the operation of feeding station, designated areas where you can leave carcasses, but also the regulation allows, actually, you can create zones where shepherds can leave their carcasses out. The way this is implemented in Cyprus is not there yet. We're still dependent on feeding stations. But when I mentioned earlier, what we're trying to do is create these farm feeding stations. So you have a lot across the island where in an how do you say it, irregular or non-predictable time and space, you have food for the species. So we do need the feeding stations. There are two types, the heavy ones, or heavily operated, the ones we have, and the smaller farm feeding stations. But of course, this needs to be done in collaboration with the veterinary services and the Game and Fauna Service. So these feeding stations are not used as an excuse for shepherds to slaughter illegally animals. And I mean, it needs to be regulated and monitored. And also it needs to be done in a way where the provision of food matches the size of the population. You cannot have like 40 feeding stations now with, tons of animals and you have 30 birds. It will create other problems. So it needs to be done in a careful, designed, planned manner. So, sorry. It's a documentary we did as part of the Life with Vultures project. It's 30 minutes. Not because I've been part of it, but it's really a great video. But unfortunately, because it competes in contests for nature films, we don't have it online yet, and we cannot have it online yet because it will get excluded by these competitions. So we will stop the recording for the people that maybe are watching online. So I hope you enjoyed, and if you have questions after the documentary, I'm at your availability. Do I do anything with the sound?